Hi, this is Peter Teuscher. I'm here with Tobi Debker. We're coming you live for us, recorded for you from the Debker home studio here in Uppsala, Sweden. Hope I pronounced it correctly.
Very good.
First time we've seen each other since 2019, so it's great to be having a live conversation.
Sure is.
This is the first recorded live conversation, but we've been talking since I got here. So we thought this is a great way of, as opposed to the usual on-screen kind of conversations that most people are having in their virtual meetings. It's kind of nice to be doing this live and in person.
Yeah.
On our chats before this, you came up with a great idea for a conversation today. So.
All right. Yeah. So, well, since you got here, I guess we've been out just chatting and talking as we do all the time. And it was interesting. It's interesting when you meet again that you sort of tap into each other's experiences more and share your experiences. And then we started thinking about that, how in the way that our experiences shapes us, and the way that our experience makes us either stronger or more resilient or make us grow, and what decisions that come out of the situations or experiences that we go through or put in. So let's talk about experiences. I mean, we can talk about both about actual experiences, but also from that view of what it does to you, how it helps you to develop, and how you can deal with them in different ways to grow.
Yeah, I think today's conversation, what I most kind of want to talk about or remind people is the value of the aggregate of all of your experiences, good or bad. Because when you think about the things that have made you grow the most in life, it's usually, it's usually the things that have been a challenge and a struggle, right? And at the time that you're going through them, you don't love them, but at the end, you become stronger for it, or you learn something about yourself.
Yeah. So, well, I wonder. I mean, I think just thinking about that, I definitely think that the experiences that are tough, that are challenging, they are experiences that you will really remember.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about that. They make you grow more than any other experiences.
No.
Because you have really positive experiences that you don't maybe think about that much.
Absolutely.
But they can really make you grow and develop.
So I think, anything that's really emotionally charged is what lodges in your memory the strongest, right? That's what builds those really strong memories. And so I think the negative emotions tend to, come forward a lot, but also the really positive ones. So I agree with you. It's not just those. I think when we rise to a challenge, we really have to dig deep, access all our resources, even improvise and do things that we didn't even realize we could do. And I think that's why I find the really challenging experiences that we go through to be some that are, and sometimes we know they're going to be challenging. Like, I mean, some of the athletic stuff you do, I don't know if I'd be up for it, but to do a triathlon or an Ironman or anything like that, I don't have the desire to do it. I mean, I love sports, I love being fit, but for me, it doesn't inspire me. But I've done things where, I mean, when I gave up everything in Canada and moved to Europe, I mean, it was exciting, but it was also a bit scary, because everybody was, "What are you, crazy? Look at the life you've got here, and then why would you give all that up?" And it was hard at the beginning, right? Making the adjustment and so on. So sometimes we even take on these challenges that we know are going to be a bit scary, or maybe we don't know if we have all the skills and the ability to do it successfully. I remember Elon Musk talking about when he, after he made his millions, I think it was 150 million from selling PayPal, he put it all into Tesla, or even when he started SpaceX, I think he said there was less than 5% chance he thought he would be successful. So, I mean, okay, that's an extreme case. I don't know if I go that far, but I mean, whether it's an athletic, like, I think for me to take on a marathon, or a few years ago for my birthday, I did the Inca Trail to Machu Picchu, and I tell you, the first day I thought I was gonna die, and so it was the altitude and the thin air and a long day on little sleep. But I think those kind of, now I look back to it, it was such a fond memory, and I just just proved to me what I can, what I can do. And I'm sure we all have those experiences. So I think the thing we can take from that is we've all figured out ways to solve problems in life. And sometimes, we forget about, we had the tools to do something similar in the past. And then it's tapping into that, the things we learned from that experience that can really help us. We sometimes we're looking for new solutions when we already have the solution from past experience. We just need to adapt it to a new situation.
Yeah, sure. I mean, and putting that into a theoretical context, I mean, I started thinking both about experience-based learning and also actually about appreciative inquiry, that are kind of based in what kind of experiences have you had before and how can you utilize that. And if you look at experience-based learning, it's all about, okay, first creating an experience or having an experience. And of course, that will be emotionally charged, maybe, as you said, and things will happen to you, will have a feeling about it and a sensation. But then the part after that is really about the reflective observation. So taking the time to reflect on, well, what did that experience do to me? What happened to me as a result of that experience? And then tapping, and then it becomes abstract thinking or abstract conceptualization, and putting it into a framework before you actually start actively experimenting with it. But for me, at least and people are a bit different here, but for me, the experience and the reflective observation part is so important, to first have the experience, but then how often do you actually actively think and reflect on your past experiences and how you can utilize that. And there's a certain power in that that I think is really important, because very often we just go through our experiences and we take it for granted and we just sort of move on. But that moment of sitting down and thinking back, reflecting on what happened there, what can I learn from it? What did I do really well? What can I do more? I mean, asking ourselves these kind of questions, for me, that's really, really, really helpful.
Yeah, I think that's a process that I apply in coaching, where someone doesn't know if they're up for the challenge of something that's coming up, or they're trying to make a decision or choice in life, and they get worried that they're, whether they have imposter syndrome or they, all these different things that stand in their way. And then I work with them on, tell me the last time you had a really big challenge or a really difficult situation that you overcame, and what did you do to get that? And you're right, people don't think back to those things, or they don't relate them to a current situation. That was then, this is now. Can I do it again? I think these are some of the fears that we have, and so I think it's a good habit to, if you're confronted with a difficult situation, to go back and remember some of the challenges that you've had, just even if it's for the sake of realizing that you have overcome challenges in the past.
Sure.
And you can probably do it again.
Yeah.
And within that context, you can probably find some resources that you can reapply currently. And it's funny that, I sometimes forget to do that, even though I do it with a coaching client.
I think everybody does, right?
Exactly.
Think about in any work situation, if you're working on a project or whatever, how often do you actually do an after action or post action review of things and capture your learnings and the experience? We kind of don't take our time to do it because we're too busy, or just things keep moving on. But we all know the importance of doing it, and if we create a habit of doing it, we can capture so much learning. And then, as you say, next time, what kind of experiences have I had, and how can I utilize these learnings in different situations?
And sometimes when we've had these, we think that we should know the answer because I've got so many years of experience in this, in whatever I do, and we think that I should know the answer to this, but I think when you consciously take some time to go into the past and look at, how did I solve problem in the past, or what actions did I take that led to outcomes I wasn't happy with, so that I can apply that this time and avoid those things, those pitfalls, right? I think some reflection is a really important thing. I mean, your experiences are so valuable, and when you don't take the time to take stock and to reflect on those things, when I think sometimes I get down on, I think, wow, I talk, we have this podcast, I write about this stuff, and then I find myself making a mistake that, I do something that, where I think I know better. I should know better, right? And then and then I can, kind of berate myself for it and so on. But the thing is that you don't automatically have access to all that. There's so much experience you've had, and it's not, and sometimes it's a while back, which I realized when I tried out your electronic drum kit, and it's been a good over 20 years since I played the drums, and I kind of expected to sit down and be able to do it again. And the muscle memory maybe is there, but I found my mind wanting to do things my body couldn't do. So I think it's not fair to say that all of the experiences that you've had are going to be sort of at your fingertips all the time.
No, definitely not. Yeah. I mean, and I think about that a lot from a work perspective, because it's very easy to go into, when you're working a lot, when you're in kind of flow, you relate to very frequently what you've been doing in the immediate past. But then it's so fun when you're working with someone that brings up an experience or something that we did 15 years ago, like a blast from the past, right? So this activity or this way of thinking or this tool or model that fits greatly into the situation where that's great, and then you can sort of tap back into it. But for me, it takes either that I get the perspective from someone else, so I'm having, if I'm talking to you, I get ideas and just practically experiencing or sort of sharing experiences with someone else, or that I really look back and sort of look into my files and what have I done before, and what did we do with this client, or how did we approach this project or something. But it doesn't come up just by by thinking about it.
You can't just expect it to be there, right? No. There's some things we integrate it, but if you're not using it regularly, that's why so many things that you want to do well, the practice is important. A good meditation practice, or like any kind of skills. That's why they call yoga a practice, but if you're doing martial arts or whatever, I think if you want to keep that top of mind, you need to practice it regularly, right? And that's why if we're doing more training for a period and I haven't coached anybody in a while, or if my coaching is primarily leadership and management people, I will look to try and find some people to coach on a personal level, so I don't, because they're different. Sometimes they are different skill sets, and sometimes they're just different perspectives you need to have for different approaches, and so these things take practice. And I think we forget that sometimes. And I think about, even for myself, the hectic life that we have, or some of the people that I've coached and talked to, they have an accomplishment, check the box, on to the next thing, right? And then it all depends on how long ago that you check that box, right? And to expect that, well, I checked the box, so it's always going to be there. Not necessarily the case.
Unfortunately, that doesn't, at least not for me.
No, we're not. That's why the brain is not like a computer. You can't just find that file in there somewhere, right? It really is about making your brain's a network, and making those network connections again, and finding, rebuilding that, the thoughts that you think repetitively, those come up again and again. But the things where those neurons haven't fired together in a while, that connection isn't as strong, and you have to go searching for it.
And that's another thing that I was thinking about that connects with that, is the will we have to seek new experiences, and by doing that, how you can actually reconnect with past experiences. But just by looking for new kind of challenges, or sometimes you've been doing something for a long time and you feel like you need a new kind of challenge or a new experience or something, and it's so when you create that kind of excitement that, oh, this is something that is going to be, maybe it's going to be very tough and challenging, but you know that in the end it's going to be something that makes you grow, or gives you a sense of achievement, or yeah, you learn something new, or you meet new friends or people, whatever it is. So, but we always talk about that comfort zone, right? Like how much do you want to stretch it? But that will to be curious about and creating new experiences, that's something that I think is very, at least, I mean, for me, it's very, very central in my life.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people, and I'm glad you brought up the whole, being in your comfort zone, because I think there's a lot of people that will, they do get comfortable and they start to get in kind of a loop, here's my area of expertise, here's what I know that I'm good at, and you start to get comfortable with that, and you start to get uncomfortable with what used to be normal for you. Everything was new. You were always trying out new things, learning things, acquiring experience. And then as you get older, sometimes, well, yeah, I've got the experience that I need. Why do I need to branch out? And I know you're not like that. I'm not like that either. I'm constantly looking to learn, and I think that's what I'd encourage everyone is: if you're not learning, you're not growing, and you'll start to stagnate. And I think you even brought up yesterday how one way to keep your mind in shape is to learn languages, right? Your memory retention, and to be cognitively sharp. So again, that's all, adding to your experiences. I think it's super important.
Yeah. And I mean, when you study languages, it's good for your brain, but it's great for your just cultural and social network. And there's so many things that opens up. So
language really opens the door to a lot of cultural experience, and I think that's one of the things I'm so appreciative for, is when I grew up in Vancouver, Canada, and it's such a multicultural kind of an environment there, because most people are, other than the indigenous people, everybody's immigrated there at some point, whether it's your first generation or several generations ago. But so in my circle of friends, I would have had someone Indian, someone Chinese, a really good friend, Jay, in Canada, is Japanese. He introduced me to a lot of great sushi, I mean, among other things, we coached basketball together. So, obviously you did a lot more than that. But I think I really appreciated that experience of growing up, always having access, always really experiencing different cultures, or people who brought with their culture with them. And then it just gave you a different perspective on life and on living. And that in itself. And then on top of that, travel's been just one of the greatest experiences for me. And if we're going to start about telling stories, I think one of the most impressive, or one of the most impactful experiences in my life. I mean, I've had a few, from starting a business with my brother to moving over to Europe, but I backpacked through Asia for 6 months, and I'd been to China once before, but other than meeting Asian people who'd already kind of culturally integrated in Canada to some degree, other than that, I hadn't really experienced those cultures firsthand. And it was just amazing, because I experienced people who were, I guess, poor by Western standards, but super happy. I could really, there were people that I met who, I swear, if I said, look, come with me, I'm going to get you a really great job, you're going to earn 100 times what you make here, and lots of opportunities. I swear they would turn me down and go, no, I got my family here, I really love where I live, and I'm happy, right? And then you turn that around, and I look at people in the rat race who are like trying to pursue their career in pursuit of status, title, money, sometimes, right? Not always. And those people are, not the happiest people. Those are the ones who come for coaching.
Sure.
So that whole experience of traveling, experiencing languages, cultures, people, but meeting people who see the world from a different perspective, who've had a totally different experience than me, was just such a fabulous experience that I'll never forget. And so yeah, I have a friend from Canada who said, every world leader or politician should have to spend at least 6 months backpacking through the world, experiencing it that way.
I mean, it's funny. Obviously, I have a very similar experience. I mean, with my whole China background and going there. But I just reflecting on what you're saying, it's so, for me, it doesn't matter so much what kind of experience you've had, but it's so interesting when you meet someone that has a really unique kind of experience. And yeah, have been like a different kind of story to tell. I think it's really inspiring, but then you also, as you're mentioning, you get the other perspectives and understand what life can be about. And it's very often people that take some risks or maybe challenge themselves, but there are they come with a story of a unique experience that kind of in some ways maybe you identify them with the story or with the experience, right? And how that's interesting to see how these experiences can shape you, or at least the perception that you get of a person, right?
And that's a really great segue into one thing I wanted to talk about, which was mentoring and how important that is. Because for me, mentoring is capitalizing on the experience of other people, right? And so it's not an age thing, because it's someone, you can be mentored by anyone who has more experience than you in a certain area, right? So in that case, a young person with tons of experience on computers could mentor an elderly person who hasn't grown up.
Reverse mentoring, I mean, that's a big thing in a lot of companies.
Absolutely. So I think finding really ways to capitalize on other people's experience. I think whenever you want to learn to do anything, find someone to mentor you, or whether you're a young person trying to figure out your way in life, find someone who's had a really interesting life and see if they can mentor you, or or if you're just very specifically wanting to learn something new in a certain area, see if there's someone who can mentor you. Because I don't know about you, but for me, learning by doing is my, I can watch YouTube videos, or I can read a book on things, but for me, it really, I have a sense of understanding when I can try it out, when I can apply something. That's when the real learning happens for me. So if someone's experience can create that picture in my mind, or that understanding, that's and make it easier to get started and to start the learning process, I think that's worth the time.
I mean, there are different learning styles, but there are different concepts and models about this from both from Kolb and from Mumford and Honey. I know that it seems like the validation for these kind of studies aren't great, so it's a bit difficult to say how accurate they are. But I mean, at least the idea is that we can learn in different ways. But if we look at experience-based learning, then it's the experience is very central. But then some people might learn more from the actual experience. Some people might learn more from, they need to conceptualize it or put it into a theory or something. But some people just need to do something, learning by doing, as you're like actively experimenting with the experience that you have. Let's just try it out and see what happens, right? But and if you look at Erikson's work, it's all about very committed structured practice and feedback. Structured practice and a lot of feedback, and that's really how you learn. And then you can learn if you just put your mind to it and get structured feedback in a good way that makes you progress. You can achieve basically everything.
And I think that's an important point, because experience, just experiencing things randomly, that can be interesting. But when you talk about practice, it's about it's not just about how many hours of practice, but it's about focused attention to doing things. Like if I from basketball, if I go out and I just shoot the basketball, but I don't think about my mechanics, or because that's another thing. If you don't practice it regularly, you kind of you may adopt different things, and then all of a sudden you don't understand why your shot's not going in, or and then you get someone to coach you, or to look at your, what maybe the bad habit you've developed, or whatever. So I think if you're trying to gather experience, making sure that it's quality experience, not just, so it depends on what you're trying to do. Obviously, I think when you're traveling, you just want to be open, right? But I think if you're trying to learn something new, make sure that it's relevant experience, or valuable experience.
Yeah, and it depends on I mean, the amount of time or resources that you have, right? And if you want to have a structured instructor for every hobby that you have, you're going to have a lot of money, right? It's pretty expensive.
Yeah.
But yeah, choosing what you want to put your effort into.
Yeah. I think the other thing that I wanted to talk about in terms of experience is we sometimes past experiences will stand in our way, right? I think that's something as a coach that I'll help people overcome sort of beliefs they've developed because of negative experiences. But I think that, all your experience has made you who you are. So, I mean, I'm a person who's been through, who's luckily been able to get some therapy. Many years ago, I went through, I worked through a lot of things that were standing in my way, and that was super valuable. So to try and label stuff as bad, or to say, I just want to forget that. I mean, all of those things that got you here made you who you are. So if you're happy, I'm pretty happy with who I am now. I'm not perfect. I still have areas I want to grow in, but I think I don't want to give up any of those things from my past that, when I was going through them, I hated it, in therapy, you talk about things from your childhood, but, they molded me as a person. I didn't love going through my divorce, but, I learned a lot about myself, and it'll mean I have better relationships now. So I think every experience you have has value, to say, and to just hold that negative emotion about those past experiences, I think is not helpful, right? I think that's why, therapy is really helpful, and I recommend it to anyone that, it has some healing to do from their past, but also just holding resentment and holding guilt and holding frustration over the past. The past is gone, but if you can recognize what you learned from that, take it with you, then that experience was super valuable.
Yeah, it's interesting. I always find that interesting sort of thought experiment, to think, looking back into the past and think about what are the things that you regret. And very often, at least for me and for a lot of people that I've encountered, it's not the things that you regret, it's the things that you didn't do that you kind of regret. But like you didn't try something out, or I didn't spend more time with a certain individual, or so. And even when you're these kind of surveys that they do with people that are very close to death, right? It's the things that they didn't do that they kind of regret, right?
Yeah, I forget the author's name, but she was a nurse who wrote the five biggest regrets of the dying, or something like that. And you're right. People will regret the things they didn't do, because the things they did do, they know the outcomes of, right? So it's those things. Well, what if I had done things differently? And I don't know if the benefit of, I try to avoid regret. I don't think it's a super helpful emotion, but I think it is a good thing to remember, that it's not that, if you try something and you fail, that's not going to be your biggest regret.
Exactly.
It's if you hadn't tried it all, that's going to be the biggest regret.
It's putting that into that perspective. So if we're standing in a choice of something that I don't know if I want to do this, well, what's the worst that can happen? What's at risk? I love that question. So what's at risk if you try this, or if you go down that path, or
what's the worst that could happen?
And we talk a lot about these false assumptions, but it's so often that they come into play, and they kind of hinder us to create these new experiences. And for me, we're not living life to its fullest potential if we're not open to these kind of experiences.
Yeah. And I think when you think about what we're doing here in these conversations, we talk a lot about our experiences, and I think developing your own experience is obviously important, and really appreciating all that you've been through to get where you are right now, right? And that's, for me, sometimes it's only when I look back at my experiences that I realize how far I've come, right? Sometimes you feel like, geez, I still feel like a beginner, and then when you reflect, you realize you've actually come a long way. And so I got myself off track. Such a bad habit of doing that. There's another really important point that I wanted to make tied to that. Anyway, it'll come back to me.
All right. Well, should we just segue into another question then? If you allow us, we can be a bit personal.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll come back to it. It'll come back to me, because I had two things, and I went one path and forgot about the other one.
All right.
Anyway.
So I'm just thinking about if we could share a little bit of what are some of the sort of major experiments that have shaped who you are, or who I am. I don't know if you want to start.
Sure. I guess where to start? For me, a lot changed when getting into business for myself with my brother. We had a little business that felt like a real dream come true. And then kind of realizing that all that aside, it wasn't making me happy. And I think all the things that I've done in my life were, I've done a lot of different things, like you, I've been a musician in the past. I've worked in different industries, and all of those, that diversity of experience really helped me now in coaching, because I've done everything from being an entrepreneur and to working in the corporate world and lots of things in between. And so obviously that helps me coaching in the leadership area. But I think that those things were, I thought, this is it, this is gonna, I think whenever you get to a point where you think, okay, I found the thing that's going to make me happy, that's going to be fulfilling, and you put all these expectations on it. I think that's those are the big moments of realization that there's never just that one thing. So I think when I hit certain milestones in my life, it's never about arriving, right? I think that's what I've learned through all these experiences. When I met my ex-wife, I thought that, this is it. And then that's a big pitfall of, I think, marriage, of some relationships, when you think you've arrived and you get complacent, right? Or, you get a job that you finally hit that target income that you were expecting, or, and you think, okay, this is it, and I think that's the thing that I keep learning over and over. And I've those expectations are out the window. I've accepted that it's just this ongoing journey. But I think those experiences that I've had where I think I've finally found it, and then I'm disappointed, right? And it's usually a combination of the experiences, not experience, the expectations that I put on that. Okay. And then, it's because the experience will never meet your expectations. Otherwise, you don't need to have the experience. If you can already conjure the experience in your mind beforehand, I guess you don't really need the experience, right? And so I think, all those milestones in my life, whether it was, playing in a band and playing to a sold out show. I remember one show, the biggest show we ever did, we played to this, it was really highly promoted by this radio station. We played for like 1,000 people, and I just felt like, whoa, that was back at a very young age, and then realizing, so what, the life goes on, and then you still got to keep working. There's never this like, okay, I've made it, there's always this continued, and good, because if your experiences stop there, or the challenges that create those experiences stop there, what good would that be?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's, I mean, it's interesting with even when you look at motivation, what motivates people, and you see all these really successful people, and you think, why don't they just enjoy what they have and stop? But it's this drive that is driving us forward to achieve more or accept new challenges, create new experiences, see what else can be done. I think humans are fascinating in that way. It can be dangerous, but yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, but I think the most profound thing was when I really addressed not the outer expectations or the things I wanted to achieve out there, but really starting the inner work that I really didn't get to until sort of my early 30s. And then, I've talked about now that I did some therapy, but I also, I had my first meditation teacher, and I was having back trouble. So I started, as a last resort, I started doing yoga, and now I love doing yoga. And I just started doing a lot of the inner work. And I think that experience of recognizing that, when you figure out the internal processes, you understand yourself better. When you understand yourself better, you know what you want a lot. That will become a lot clearer, and then you see where the mistakes or the misfortune or the circumstances that you face externally, a lot of it could be either recognized beforehand, or you wouldn't have put yourself in that situation if you'd done that inner work, right? So I think that early the early 30s, where I really embarked on my journey of personal development, I think that was where I sort of if I'm going to say that was the big turning point in my life, I'd have to say that was the biggest one.
Okay. Yeah, and I was thinking just when you said that about experiences and the sort of correlation between our inner sort of processing or our inner wants or inner beliefs with our experiences, how they tie together. And that's definitely been my experience as well, that I'm really happy and content with seeking out experiences that are correlated in a positive way with my inner beliefs and my inner motivation. And you kind of seek out experiences that or challenges that are attached to that somehow, and that gives everything a little bit more of a purpose or something. And I'm just reflecting back on any experiences that I had that I wasn't really happy with, and that was probably experiences that I took that were created for the wrong reasons. They weren't tapped in with what I actually want and what fits with me. It could be the expectations of others and stuff like that. But when you have that really inner driving force that I want to have this experience, so this fits with me, it's so it's such a good feel.
I think another thing when you reflect back on experiences, so when you reflect back on negative experiences, and whether it be, people blame their parents for stuff, or they'll be, what was I thinking back then? Well, that's really easy to see now, now with all the experience you've had. And so whether it's, when I think about my parents, and they had a lot of great things, some things they did weren't so great, but I think that's everybody. There's no such thing as a perfect parent. But one thing I would keep reminding myself is they did the best they could with what they knew how to do, right? Because, your parents learned from their parents, and so there's things that get inherited down the line. But there's also circumstances that, are different now than they were then. And so I think that's an important thing, both with other people, that things happen to you in the past because of your relationship to them, or the decisions you made. You did the best you could with what you knew how to do, right? And I think giving yourself a break like that is important. So the thing is, if you continue to repeat the same mistakes, then you're not learning from your experience.
Sure.
But if there's something a choice you're unhappy with from the past, well, then just learn from it and move on, right?
Yeah.
And so if you can let yourself off the hook and let others off the hook by just recognizing that, from this vantage point, it's really easy to see the things that went wrong. But you didn't have the knowledge experience back then, and neither did the people you were interacting with, whether they're your parents or past relationship or whatever.
Yeah, sure. I mean, and again, it comes back to that pause of after the experience to think about, okay, so what happened there? And what can I take away from this? And this is, of course, this is what we do in coaching and well, any kind of learning activity. And I find myself doing that as a parent every single day. So we've had an experience. So what can we take away from this? What can we learn from it? And it's a two-way street. I learn something, my children learn something. It's everybody takes something away too. Okay, so how can we do something better of this next time?
Yeah, it's so funny, the people that I observe that are parents, and we have this idea that parents are supposed to be teaching their kids something, right?
Yeah.
But I find in so many cases, at least all that I observe, that a lot of times, well, it's certainly a two-way street, but a lot of times the parents are learning a whole lot more from their kids than the other way around, because kids are very curious and intuitive, and they learn a lot of stuff that way. But I think that kids are a great reminder for people to not lose that sort of the childish curiosity that you had, but also just like with any relationship, you learn from it. You learn about yourself from that reflection you get from whether it's your kids or other people.
Yeah, sure.
But I've seen so many times where it's like the parent doesn't realize it at the time, but wow, the kid is just teaching them a really important lesson. So yeah, I find that's fascinating, and so I'm grateful. My girlfriend's got an 8-year-old daughter, and I don't have kids, and so it's been really nice to have that experience. She's got her father, and I'm in no way taking on any of that role, but to have that interaction, I think, and this, now I'm remembering what I wanted to say before about the value of we were talking about mentoring and so on. I think that that contact between generations is really important. And if we get too disconnected from people because of their age, I think that we're missing out on big opportunities. And so that connection with, like I said, with parents, with their kids, the parents are learning a ton. And I think I could learn a lot from interacting with a child or a young person. That's why the experience with me coaching teenage boys basketball was really fulfilling for me. But also when I think back to, I loved when my grandfather, sitting down at the table with him and just talking about his experiences in life, that was so valuable. So I think having that connection between the generations is so important. And as we live in a very fast-paced world where people of a certain generation may feel a bit lost, and there may be a big communication gap. But if both sides really make an effort to, even within companies, right? That guy's, he's so old school, and you come out of, I've seen so many times young people coming out of university, they think they know everything, and they're gonna change the world at the workplace or wherever. But what they're missing is the experience. And if only they wouldn't have that attitude of that's so old school. That person's experience is no longer relevant. You're fooling yourself. There's something about someone who's lived that many more years than you that will have experience that is definitely relevant.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and I know a lot of leaders that are very kind of seasoned, have been in the game for a really long time, and they're a bit doubtful of, are they perceived as too old school or whatever, but they just have a ton of good leadership experiences, and that's actually what you need. So I agree. I mean, we need that well, to mind that gap. And it's also, I mean, when you look at knowledge transfer in organizations, especially with tacit knowledge, I think it's so interesting when you look at these models of, when you become an expert in something, you don't know why you know something.
Yeah.
So there's no way that you can transfer this in a comprehensible way to someone else. You just know it, but you don't know why. So if you have an organization like a large organization that I work for in Europe, where their workforce is aging so quickly. So in a few years, like 30% of their workforce is going to go into retirement, and they're sitting on all the knowledge, because this company have been doing very big, very, very large sort of machines for the past 50 years. So how do you transfer that knowledge to someone else if they don't know how to explain it, and the younger generation, they're not interested, or they think that they have all the answers themselves? Now then you're setting yourself up for a bit of trouble there.
Yeah, there's I think it was in Timothy Galway's he did the whole Inner Game
sitting and looking at that book right there.
and which for fantastic. First, when I was first getting into my own personal development stuff, but on my early days of coaching, that there was some such valuable information in the work that he did. I think that was it was in his book where there was it's a very old case study, but if you remember the company Xerox, sure. with the copiers, and the one of the ways because as you say, some people don't know how they know, or why they're good. So one of the technicians, that was the top technician at fixing problems with their copiers, they got some people to follow him through his day and to see what he did differently than everyone else. From that experience, they were able to, the little things that he did that were not in any manual, that they were able to realize how he was able to troubleshoot so quickly and figure out what things were going wrong. And so I think, again, these are things you can't read in a book, right? And that's why this information transfer through experience. And in Germany, there's these apprenticeship programs that I think are really valuable, that in Canada I didn't really get a chance to do. It gets exploited to some degree because they get free labor, and they sometimes there's some companies who will, rather than they'll have someone who's supposed to be learning and they're just getting coffee, right? But in a lot of cases, it's they actually get hands-on experience. They get to really be in the environment, observe, and maybe to some small degree participate. And I think that's super valuable experience. And so I think there's a big question to be asked about, how do we in between these generations, how do we do the knowledge transfer? How do we transfer all that experience? Because if you think about it, when you look back historically, we have had civilizations that built impressive societies that then declined, and we don't know how they did it, right? And we didn't take care to, whether it's the Incas or the Egyptians and how they built the pyramids or whatever. We just, there's throughout history, there's been knowledge that's been lost, unfortunately. And I think that's an important thing when you look at it from an organizational standpoint, or on a macro level as a society, and
as an individual, like we've just been talking about. So what kind of experience can I utilize? And that's kind of where we started off, I guess.
Exactly.
And I think I told you that project they have here in Uppsala now, right? That the retirees can go and have lunch with at schools and have lunch with school kids.
Well, there seems to be a different attitude here towards people who've towards your elders, because your wife was telling me that people seem to trust people with more experience more here in Sweden. At least that was her perspective. Where just because you're over 50 doesn't mean you're going to have a hard time finding a job, right? Because people still value that level of experience. Where there are other countries, and I think this is, it's been a long time since I lived in Canada or worked in. I've only worked on some projects in North America, but really being part of that culture, I back then, it was, the young go-getters. There's a real hustle culture that seems to only have accelerated, but it was always, at a certain point, you're too old, too expensive. We're going to get somebody younger, hungrier, and so on. And so, yeah, I think that's maybe an organizational culture, but it's also within countries, the way that people see that. So that was interesting to me to hear that perspective in Sweden. So is that your experience as well? Or?
In certain areas, sure. I think we could do a lot better for sure. Okay. But I also think that people are quite open to learn from the older generation. But it's also, if you look at the labor market, experience is something that is very sought after. Do you have a solid experience in various fields? It's great to be an expert in something, but I think we also talked the other day about how interesting it is with careers nowadays that the width of the experience you have is also really important. So of course you can go sort of really, really deep and become an expert in something. That's always very sought after. But equally important, and in some cases more important, it's important to have that width of different kinds of experiences from different fields, different industries, and how you can take different learnings or different experiences, put it into practice in a new context.
Yeah, and that's really valued differently in different cultures, right?
Yeah,
I find in North America, that's one of the real positives, that people recognize transferable skills between different industries. In Germany, I find, when you start working in a certain field or the experience you've had in the last 5 years, nobody cares about what else they just want to pigeonhole you in that area. At least that's kind of been my experience. And I think that you can learn a lot from, I think you're missing out when you're not looking at what skills from other industries can you, because I did a workshop once where we're looking at creative problem solving, or being creative in the workplace. And these sort of industries that have well established, but they were coming up against issues, and the way they solved the problem were they actually looked at other industries to see how they could, they took a model from some other industry and then they applied it to their own business, and they found the solution that way. And I think the same can be true of people in human resources, is just looking at, okay, this person doesn't understand their industry, but wow, look at all this experience. And maybe that person will bring us a completely different perspective, and especially if you're trying to be disruptive, right? If you're in a stagnant situation, then you need new fresh eyes and new perspectives. And I think that type of experience is valued in some cultures and unfortunately undervalued in others.
Yeah, it could be. Look nowadays how everybody is looking at the IT and tech industry and say, how are they doing things, and how can we learn from them, and finding more agile ways of working, or whatever it is. And there's a lot of trends that go into this, and something new will come later on, so that you will have to look at a different industry and say, how can I take lessons learned from that. Just having that width of experiences, and it's also fun, right? I mean, at least for me as an individual,
not for everybody.
Not for everybody, but for a lot of people like myself, I think I remember I was at some high school and they were the students were worried, about how, if I take this choice, how's that going to affect my career? If I go to law school, does that mean that I have to be a lawyer for the rest of my life? Is that the only thing I can do? And if you look around now, that's like, it doesn't matter at all what you start learning or start studying or where you start working. You can go all over the place, and very often in large organizations as well, you have that opportunity to, with the sort of internal labor market within an organization, to try all different kinds of roles.
Yeah, so it's interesting. There was a CEO that I worked for in the past, and he said, you know what my education is in? He said, I'm a historian. I studied history, and then he ended up working in finance, became CFO, became CEO. Obviously over a longer period. And and the thing is, he could have never expected that from study. I think the thing about studying, and I honestly don't think university is the right thing for everyone, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes learning a trade or building up some experience before you go to study or something will give you the right mindset and the right perspective on things. But I think the way for young people to look at whatever field of study they want to approach, if anything, it gives you it gives you a broad knowledge, and it gives you processes, habits. It forms habits of working and gathering knowledge, experience that I think are super valuable. And it gives you a foundation to work from there, right? A foundation of knowledge. So I think I envy people. Oh, I'd probably not right to say envy, but I find it very interesting that are people from a young age know that I'm going to be a doctor, and they want it to be, maybe it's something in their family, or they had a tragedy, and they think that that's their strategy for dealing with it, is that I'm going to get into the medical field. Or I mean, there was a young man that I coached in basketball, and he didn't have great grades because he didn't show up to school. Like, he was living in a foster home and so on, and he wanted to go to the same high school as his brother. They were in different foster homes. So anyway, I was coaching at the school, and so he lived right near me. So we had these drives. I would drive him either from practice to home or from home to practice, depending on when we were practicing. And so we'd have these conversations, and so these conversations seemed to open up his mind and give him a different mindset, and make him realize that, for one, that he's smart, he has a contribution to make, but there is hope. There's, and anyway, after I coached him in grade 10, and then we would keep in touch, and he really loved sports, right? So he thought that sports, there is a reason I'm telling you the story, but he really wanted to pursue sports. But he wasn't going to be big enough to be a basketball player on a professional level, or so I remember getting a call from him, and I was so proud of him, because he said, "Coach, sports was the reason I made it school fun, but when I started to get better grades, now I'm in a position that I can go to university, and I'm going to do sports medicine."
Oh, cool.
So he found another road, and they are related, but he never thought of, first of all, of himself to be smart enough to be able to do it, but he certainly didn't think of that as an option. And I've coached youth before, and one of the things I would do is, if they love video games, whatever, we'll look at what are some fun and interesting jobs, and that may not be where they end up, but then it would help them think about it would help them connect the dots between, here's some, based on my current interests and where I want to go, here are the things that I want to be learning now that could get me there. And it's just like when I say to people when I'm coaching that, it's good to have a destination, a port of call, right? Because you wouldn't get on a boat and not know where you're going. You usually chart a course somewhere. Doesn't mean that on the way there there's a storm on the horizon, you navigate around it or whatever, or you just realize, actually, someone told me about this other destination that's better, right? So you can change your mind on the way there, but all the experience you gather on that journey, and just having direction, because without direction you stagnate or you turn in circles.
But
that's important.
Isn't that the mindset that is helpful?
For sure.
There, that there is no final destination.
No, exactly.
There's interesting stuff can happen on the way, and why not explore it, right? What can you have a look around, what's on the left side, what's on the right side, and
that's why what you were pointing to, attitude, is so important, right? Keeping that, like, no matter how much experience you have in life, staying curious, staying interested, and not going, well, I know as much as I need to know to get through life, to do my job, and I'm looking forward to retirement. Well, I think your retirement will be short. Like, the people that lose that desire to keep growing and learning, and maintain that curiosity, I don't think they're very fulfilled and when you're not fulfilled in old age, sadly, you start to deteriorate very fast.
Well, mean, maybe some people are very happy with that. I'm not gonna make that kind of judgment here, but at least I can only talk from my own experience, my own situation. I know very sure that there's no way I'm gonna be able to retire at 65. I'm very happy with that. I'm willing to try a lot of different things and work for as long as maybe it's not going to be 100%, and work doesn't really look like that nowadays anyway, that you work from 9 to 5, 5 days a week. You can work on projects and do a lot of different things, but trying that new experiences.
Yeah, my definition of retirement is only doing the stuff I love to do.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty much there already. So, I mean, I still earn money. There are still things, I still have bills to pay. I'm still quite a ways from retirement, but even so, I'm already well on my way there. But because we're on the topic of, as people get older and their experience and because I for me, happiness is important. I think people's level of happiness really influence their positive contribution to society, to the people around them, and so on. But there was a documentary I watched a while back where this guy, I think he's a Swedish chef, maybe Swedish or Danish, and he travels the world, and he was on this trek to visit all these countries where they had the highest level of centenarians, so people over 100, right? So and it was amazing that these people who are still fit and active. There's this one guy who was 105 years old, or these guys in their 80s still very active, and that was the difference. It wasn't like they had the most experience, the most diverse experience, or the most fascinating lives, but they kept engaging with life. They didn't hit a point where, well, I'm retired now. That they worked on the farm, and whenever you work with the ecosystem, it's very dynamic. It's a complex system. So I think you're always learning. You're always continuing to apply your experience. So I think that those are important things. What you do with your experience really matters. And so that's why when you say, well, you don't want to judge people who just want to retire and relax and not challenge themselves. I think that I think longevity and a happy long life does have to do with maintaining, applying your experience, still being active, still not stagnating, right?
Yeah,
you can't gain any new experience if you're stagnant, in circles.
And obviously, I believe you, and I have the same kind of beliefs.
Well, we have the same
values,
mindset on that. Yeah.
So the mindset is very much there. But for people that are maybe don't share that belief or that mindset, what can we say? Encourage them to try. I really like that term that you just mentioned there. So engaging with life. What does that mean? And for me, it's about being open to new ideas, new opportunities, new challenges, and just be mindful about the context that you're in.
I was just reading a quote from Thich Nhat Hanh, who obviously just passed away this year, but he has not great at reciting quotes verbatim, but he and this is part of his mindfulness practice, that and he was talking about how too many people don't realize that they're not fully engaged in life, right?
Yeah, sure.
They're either spending a lot of time in their heads, or they're preoccupied with with whatever systems they're working within. And I think it's important to think about the experiences that you're creating for yourself. A lot of people live life as if they're looking for these peaks in life, right? These peak experiences, and everything in between is filler. And that's not there's something in every moment. And I think he was a wise, great teacher in that there's something special in every moment. And I think if you live your life for the vacations or the parties or these epic experiences or adventures, those are great. You know, those are, as we said at the beginning, those really impactful moments of experience. They you know, we really remember them because they're these emotional highs, and then sometimes we try and repeat them just sometimes out of just trying to generate the same neurochemicals. But there are things in between that are also very valuable, and I think during COVID, that's something I really, I mean, you live in a beautiful spot here too, but I you know, on my daily walk, just noticing, you know, spring's coming, there's a new green sprouting, and there's these moments that are so peaceful, and you're so able to observe them. Those are worth a lot too, not just the peaks. And it's the combination of those experiences, I think, that are so valuable, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you mention this, I'm also thinking about the importance of talking about different kind of not experiments, but what am I looking for? Just the things that you've been going through, the importance of nature, just to talking about mindfulness or any kind of experience that you've been having in nature, like when it, as you say, when spring kicks in, or when it starts, when the first snow comes, or whatever it is. And just for me, and I think for a lot of people, there's a connection with nature that makes life and experiences very much worth living as well, right?
Yeah, I think people live in big cities miss out. I live in a big city, but fortunately, you know, Hamburg's a very green city. There's lots of access to nature. Vancouver is a very, you know, beautiful city that has lots of access to nature. So I was very fortunate to always have that. But I think being in that environment helps you get really grounded, and it helps you find your kind of your center and reflect on the experiences you're having.
Well, when I moved back to Sweden, I thought it was so interesting that a lot of leaders and managers that I was talking to, they appreciated so much the opportunity to go out and just have a walk in nature, or go for a run, or just be out and breathe the fresh air and notice these subtle little changes in the world around them. And for me, that's, I wouldn't call it mindfulness practice, but it's an opportunity to be more in contact with the world around you. And when I was living in Beijing, for instance, I mean, talking about a mega city, you don't, well, of course you get that, but it's less approachable, of course.
Yeah, so I mean, I think we're on the same wavelength. Both nature has such value, and there was even a study done by psychologists or psychiatrists. Well, they were what they were measuring was in Leipzig, Germany. They were looking at the difference. I mean, the one measurable thing was people who lived in neighborhoods without trees and people who lived in neighborhoods with trees, with green, and the prescriptions for antidepressants was far higher in the places without trees than with. So I mean, maybe that's just correlation, but it's an interesting first step in understanding how important our interaction with nature is. I want to get back to a word that you threw out there, but didn't really elaborate on: experiments.
Okay. We're talking about active experimentation before.
Experimentation, and that's really interesting. I mean, I think both of us have probably on projects used that terminology. I know I have, where you encourage, so you have a 3-day workshop and you're sending, and hopefully there will be a follow-up one, but you encourage people to run experiments with what they've learned, you know, from those 3 days or those 2 days, however long they, and I think that's a habit that I encourage people, or maybe even a mindset to adopt, to look at things that, you know, when people are afraid of making mistakes, or when you learn something new, or when there's something you're curious about, run an experiment for yourself. And it's also an exercise in awareness, right? Because when you're running an experiment, you're observing, and you know, as a, you know, whether it's in meditation or in mindfulness or whatever, and I talk about getting control of your thinking, getting into that observer mode is really important. And then creating little experiments for yourself is a great way to have the experience. When you think about the scientific method, right? So you create a hypothesis, you run an experiment, and from there, you create the theory. And I think you can do that in like these micro experiments or in small ways in your life. And I think that's a great way to gain experience from an idea to the actual experience, to just confirm your knowledge or to prove yourself wrong. It's a great way to get around mental biases, to run these little experiments.
That's interesting you say that. I mean, one project that I've been working on, it's kind of on the later stages now, but I think it was last year, I spent a lot of time on this project, and it was very much based on that. I mentioned appreciative inquiry before, but and linking this to experiences. So looking at the experiences that we've had before that were positive, so what's been working well in this organization? Okay, so what if we did that more? So dreaming of, okay, if we did this a lot more, what could happen? What could the end result kind of be? So kind of visualizing the positive outcomes if we did this all the time. And then based on that, as you say, to design very simple, small experiments to implement within their immediate working environment. And this was a kind of they wanted to create a culture change of more sort of incremental small changes and learning, taking from the past what we've been doing well and just try and do new things all the time. And if we get all of our, in this case, it was like 7,000-8,000 managers to do some kind of experiments all over the globe, it's going to have a pretty big impact on the organization.
Huge.
So everybody was forced to try different kind of experiments. And it had I don't know the full output of the project, but it was very well received and really interesting to see how people got engaged and committing to doing smaller things based on what we know have worked before. So there's a real power in that. I really believe in that.
Experimentation is a great way to create experience, and that's going to be a learning experience. Right. And
so it's creating new experiences based on positive experiences from the past, and it's just like a spin-off of that. So it ties very well into the topic of the day.
Absolutely. So I don't know how much, I mean, there's a lot more I think we could say about it, but I don't know, do you want to, maybe we should wrap up here. We could just recap some of the key things, because I think, I don't know that we appreciate experience enough, whether it's our own or what's available to us from others. And so I think the biggest takeaway, there's a couple of takeaways that I want to leave people listening with. So don't judge your own experience too harshly, good or bad, right? Or too strongly, but recognize that it's got you to where you are now, which you're still alive. Hopefully you're doing well. I think so. Valuing your own experience and really valuing the experience of others. So whatever generation, whether the younger than you, older than you, you can find people to mentor you. So I think, and then finally, there are important experiences in all kinds of moments in life, not just the peaks and so I think those are the three things I'd really like people to take with them, and understanding the value that the experience has, whether it's the experiences that are still ahead of you or the ones that you've already had behind you.
The other thing that I would add that I think is really important, I think I've mentioned this many times before, but it's connected with that piece of curiosity. Sort of acknowledge and be curious about other people's experiences, because that makes life interesting. Looking at what other people have done. Everybody has an interesting story to tell if you take the time to listen to their experiences. But then also to seek out new experiences and new challenges and be curious about having an open mind. For me, that's been a life-changing kind of experience to
Yeah.
to put myself into that situation.
Actually, that if I can expand on that, my thoughts on that,
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought it up, because I think it's relevant for the times, rather than just recapping for everybody. But I think this, we've talked before about empathy, but and you mentioned curiosity. I think there's a lot of things that polarize people, or people think they know, they understand other people based on their behavior, or things that that they've read in the news. And I think that that's another really important thing, to try to put yourself in that other person's shoes, like someone you totally disagree with, or someone you're having an argument with, or someone you dislike because without really even knowing them, and just try and go, what's their journey been? What's gotten them here? How did they come to those conclusions, right? I mean, someone who's, if I want to look at the extreme cases, someone who's really racist, or who has, done some bad things, I probably wouldn't be able to relate to them. And I try to check myself when I'm judging others, right? But your inclination is to judge them, and
Sure.
and I think that they've had their own unique experience that you probably can't relate to, and there's probably something that got them there. And that's not to justify it or say that they're correct, but you're never going to meet them or understand them, or solve the problem of other people like them, if you don't appreciate the experience that has brought them to where they are now. And I think that's a really important thing to think about, whether it's people you dislike at your workplace, or any kind of person that you can see as your adversary, because there at times we have had a very polarizing events.
Sure, yeah. And I mean, you mentioned the situation before. If someone is, let's take the example, I think it was regarding domestic violence or something like that. If you grow up in an environment where domestic violence is happening all the time, it's pretty likely that that's going to spin off, right? And that you might be in being a household where you're actively doing this. It doesn't say, I mean, of course, I'm not saying that it's right, but if you understand a little bit more about that background, it creates a little bit more understanding and empathy of why the situation is, and then maybe you can try to relate to it, and I don't know if you can deal with it in a better way, hopefully. But
and I think
it's not about accepting it, but it's about creating understanding and empathy about the situation, so you can deal with it in a more constructive way.
Exactly. And I mean, you've got lots of examples of that in North America, but from very personal to me in Canada, where the First Nations people, that's how we refer to the Indigenous people in Canada. They've been through some horrible experiences, number of generations, and so then you see examples of dysfunction in their culture, and you judge. And that, certainly I had a friend in high school who was First Nations, and very bright and did well at school and so on. But there were other people who, drug issues or alcoholism and so on. And then you can judge them, and you even tie it to their race, and you create this stereotype for yourself without appreciating that, the amount of generational abuse or hardship that these people have had to endure, and to judge them on that outcome is really unfair, right? And if you want to be, if you, I think Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in the world, right? So if you want to have a better world, or you want to help those people create a better outcome for the general society you live in, you've got to meet them where they are, and you've got to respect and appreciate the road that they've been through to get here, right? And it's just like when I know Russell Brand's a great example. He's gone to prisons and talked to people who've about their road to where they are, and they have regrets, and they have their own list of experiences. But through their experience, they've learned, and they, some of them would be repeat offenders, some would have totally changed around their lives, and are now giving back in that prison system. So I think when you appreciate that there's a whole bunch of events that have brought someone to the place they are, and rather than saying they're evil, they're bad, just realizing that, well, there may be a lot of negative experience that has brought them, that you were fortunate enough not to have to go through. Right. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that in there in the end, because what you said really brought that up in my consciousness to, I thought that was an important point to.
Sure.
Cool. Well, let's wrap it up there.
All right. Next time we'll be in Hamburg.
Yeah, come to Hamburg. I don't have quite as sophisticated a setup as you do here, but we'll it would be great to host you there. But yeah, thanks for hosting myself and my girlfriend here, and great to have this conversation live. So hopefully we brought it for the listeners, or even some of the viewers. It's great to thank you for joining us for our conversation. I hope it's been
we had fun,
stimulating. We always have fun. I mean, we do this as much for ourselves as for anyone else, but hopefully out of the conversation there's been some inspiration and wisdom for others.
Definitely.
Great. Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you next time. Probably we will be remote again, doing it the old usual way, but today it's been fun to do it this way.
Sure has.
Thanks, Toby.
Thanks.
Talk to you soon.
See ya.